They tell you humans are soft, squishy, short-lived bags of water who stumble through the galaxy relying on cheap kinetic guns and dumb luck. I heard the royal guards laughing about it. Then the bulkhead blew, and they learned exactly why you never, ever corner a human. The ventilation system at Taggart's Drop had been coughing up black dust for 3 days. I was wedged under the primary thermal manifold, elbows deep in grease that smelled like burnt hair and oxidized copper. My knuckles were bleeding. They were always bleeding. That's what happens when you spend your life keeping a decaying refueling depot from collapsing into the vacuum of space. Is he deceased? The voice was melodious, bright and utterly out of place in Sector 4. It sounded like a crystal glass chiming in a room full of rusted iron. Just sleeping, Your Highness, or in some primitive regenerative state. Best not to touch him. Humans carry a staggering variety of native microbes. I wiped a streak of grease from my forehead with the back of my forearm, grimaced, and slid out from under the conduit. I sat up, joints popping like firecrackers in the quiet bay. Standing 10 feet away was a trio that looked like they had taken a wrong turn at a galactic gala. Princess Genevieve. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with pale, iridescent gold skin and 4 pupilless violet eyes that looked down at me with a mixture of curiosity and profound disgust. She belonged to the Aurelian sovereign, a race of long-lived, delicate aristocrats who usually stayed deep within the core worlds. Flanking her were her 2 royal guards, Captain Wyatt and Lieutenant Jackson. Don't let the translated names fool you. They were just as alien as she was. Wyatt wore a set of ceremonial armor that flowed over his slender frame like liquid silver. He carried a sleek, humming, hard light staff. Jackson was the muscle, relatively speaking, broader shoulders, thicker armor, but still possessing that fragile avian grace all Aurelians had. Their luxury cruiser had suffered a catastrophic warp core misalignment. They had managed to limp to my station, the only habitable rock within a dozen parsecs, to wait for a royal extraction fleet. That was 6 hours ago. For 6 hours I had to listen to them talk about me, as if I didn't possess a functional auditory cortex. "I'm not asleep," I grunted, tossing a heavy steel wrench into my battered red toolbox. "I'm fixing the life support, unless you prefer breathing carbon monoxide, Captain." Wyatt's violet eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, grease monkey. You are addressing the third heir to the Sun Throne. You should be averting your gaze. Down here, the only throne we have is in the latrine," I muttered, turning my back to them. I wasn't in the mood. I was a contractor. 38 years old, tired, underpaid, and surviving on cheap synthesized coffee. I didn't care about galactic royalty. I cared about my paycheck. "Fascinating," Genevieve whispered to Jackson, loud enough for me to hear. "So hostile." The Environmental Codex mentioned humans were prone to aggressive bursts due to their short lifespans. They simply don't have the time to cultivate patience. I grabbed a rag and started wiping the grime off my hands. "We cultivate patience just fine, Princess. We just don't waste it." Jackson stepped forward, his silver armor shifting silently. "That is enough. Return to your labor, human." I was about to tell him exactly where he could shove his hard light staff when the deck vibrated. It wasn't a rumble from the thrusters. It was a sharp, localized shudder, the kind of impact that travels through solid metal and rattles your teeth. I stopped wiping my hands. The rag slipped from my fingers. The overhead lights flickered, buzzed violently, and died. Emergency crimson lighting kicked on, bathing the maintenance bay in a harsh, bloody glow. "What did you do?" Wyatt snapped, his staff instantly igniting into a brilliant, blinding white blade of energy. "Shut up," I hissed. I dropped to one knee and pressed my palm flat against the grated deck. Thump, 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 thump. Vibrations, dozens of them, fast, erratic, moving through the lower access tunnels. My stomach dropped into my boots. Taggart's Drop was built on top of an old mining colony. The corporation that owned it had dug too deep, hit a subterranean nesting ground, and hastily abandoned the rock. They left behind the equipment. They left behind the station. But mostly, they left behind the crawlers. Crawlers were blind, subterranean predators. Think of a praying mantis the size of a motorcycle, covered in dense, chitinous armor, with a jaw that could bite through structural steel. They hunted by vibration and heat, and a crashed luxury cruiser venting raw plasma was a dinner bell. "They're inside the perimeter," I said, my voice tight. I stood up, abandoning my tools, and moved toward a heavy, reinforced locker at the back of the bay. "What is inside the perimeter?" Genevieve asked, her regal composure finally cracking just a fraction. "The local wildlife." Before I could reach the locker, the main blast door at the far end of the bay bowed inward. The thick titanium shrieked, warping under immense pressure. "Guards!" Genevieve cried out, taking a step back. Wyatt and Jackson moved with practiced, flawless synchronization. They stepped in front of the princess, their silver armor locking together to form a barricade. They raised their weapons. Beautiful, silent weapons of civilized warfare. Energy projectors that fired hyper-focused thermal beams. The blast door gave way with a deafening screech of tearing metal. A tide of clicking, chittering horror spilled into the room. 3 crawlers scrambled over the torn metal, their scythe-like forelimbs clicking rapidly against the deck. They were pale, sickly grey, with eyeless, angular heads snapping in our direction. "Engaging," Wyatt said calmly. He fired. A brilliant blue beam of thermal energy struck the lead crawler dead in the center of its carapace. The shot was perfect. It melted through the shell instantly, cauterizing the flesh beneath. In Aurelian warfare, a precise, cauterized wound was an instant kill, or at least caused the enemy to enter shock and surrender. But crawlers didn't have a central nervous system like ours, and they didn't care about shock. They only cared about hunger. The burned crawler didn't even slow down. It let out a high-pitched, grinding hiss and launched itself across the room. Wyatt's eyes went wide. His civilization had long ago engineered the brutality out of their conflicts. He had never seen something take a lethal blow and keep coming. He hesitated. It was only half a second, but it was enough. The crawler slammed into his hard light shield, shattering the projection. The kinetic force of a 400-pound monster, moving at a sprint, threw Wyatt backward like a rag doll. He hit the bulkhead with a sickening crunch and slumped to the floor, his silver armor dented, gasping for air. "Wyatt!" Jackson yelled. He fired his weapon repeatedly, scoring direct hits on the beast, but the thermal beams just burned neat, clean holes through its limbs. It didn't stop the mechanical fury of the creature. Another crawler flanked Jackson. Its scythe whipped out, catching the guard's shoulder. The razor-sharp edge sheared through his ceremonial armor and sliced deep into his pale flesh. Jackson didn't scream. He simply collapsed. Aurelian biology was designed for self-preservation. When they experienced significant physical trauma, their bodies immediately released heavy endorphins and shut down into a comatose state to prevent bleeding and pain. It was a highly evolved survival mechanism for a civilized galaxy. Out here, it was a death sentence. Genevieve backed away, her hands pressed to her mouth, her violet eyes wide with absolute terror. She was cornered between the sparking control consoles and 2 twitching, hungry monsters. Her elite guards, the pride of the Sun Throne, were downed in less than 15 seconds. The lead crawler slowly turned its eyeless head toward her, its mandibles clicking in anticipation of the body heat she was radiating. I reached the locker. I punched in the 6-digit override code, hauled the heavy steel door open, and reached inside into the dark. "Hey, ugly!" I shouted. The crawlers paused, their heads snapping toward the new source of vibration. I stepped out from behind the locker. I wasn't holding a sleek thermal projector. I wasn't holding a hard light staff. I was holding a piece of heavy, ugly, primitive human history. An M89 auto shotgun. Pump action, drum-fed, chambered in 12-gauge Magnum. Slung across my chest was a bandolier of tungsten buckshot shells. I also had my heavy steel wrench tucked into my belt. Civilized space outlawed kinetic firearms centuries ago. They called them barbaric. They said relying on chemical explosions to propel metal slugs was dangerous, messy, and unrefined. They were absolutely right. I racked the slide. Clack, clack. The sound echoed through the bay, sharp and violent. The lead crawler lunged at me, clearing half the distance in a single bound. I planted my boots, brought the heavy stock to my shoulder, and pulled the trigger. The boom in the enclosed maintenance bay was apocalyptic. The M89 didn't hum or glow. It roared. A massive flash of fire erupted from the muzzle, accompanied by a concussive shockwave that physically shook the dust from the ceiling. Aurelian's had sensitive hearing. Genevieve dropped to her knees, covering her ears, a cry of pain escaping her lips. The tungsten buckshot hit the crawler mid-leap. It wasn't a neat, cauterizing thermal beam. It was raw, blunt-force kinetic trauma. The sheer physical impact arrested the creature's momentum entirely. The heavy metal pellets shattered its thick, chitinous armor, tearing through the soft tissue beneath and blowing a fist-sized crater out of its back. It hit the floor as a heap of twitching, leaking meat, dead before it stopped sliding. I didn't stop to admire the work. The heavy recoil bruised my shoulder, but the familiar pain sharpened my focus. I pumped the shotgun again, ejecting a smoking, brass shell casing that clinked loudly against the floor gratings. The second crawler, the one that had cut Jackson, screeched and charged. It zigzagged, its scythes tearing up the deck plates. I fired again. Missed the center mass. The blast took off its front left leg at the joint. Greenish ichor sprayed across the crates. The creature stumbled, but used its momentum to throw itself at me, wildly slashing its remaining forelimb. I stepped back, but the floor was slick with grease. My boot slipped. The crawler's scythe caught me on the left thigh. It felt like a hot iron rod tearing through denim, skin, and muscle. I fell hard onto my back, the breath knocked out of my lungs. The shotgun slipped from my grasp, sliding out of reach. Genevieve screamed from her corner. I saw her looking at me, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization. She was waiting for me to shut down. She was waiting for the human to go into a graceful, pain-free coma like her guards. She didn't know about human biology. We don't have a delicate, evolved off switch. We have adrenaline, we have cortisol, we have millions of years of mammalian evolution screaming out of the primate brain. If you stop moving, you die. The pain didn't put me to sleep. It set me on fire. The crawler loomed over me, raising its scythe for the killing blow, its jaws dripping with toxic saliva. I roared, not out of bravery, but out of pure, unadulterated fury. I reached down to my belt, pulled the heavy steel wrench, and swung it upward with every ounce of strength I had left. The solid iron connected with the underside of the crawler's jaw with a sickening crack. The force of the blow shattered its mandibles and knocked its head backward. I scrambled backward, kicking the beast in its wounded chest to gain distance. I ignored the warm blood pouring down my leg. The pain was secondary. It was just a signal, an alarm bell, and I muted it. I grabbed the shotgun off the floor, rolled to one knee, racked it one-handed by bracing the pump against my uninjured leg, and jammed the barrel directly into the creature's exposed neck. I pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly snapped my wrist. The top half of the crawler ceased to exist, decorating the wall behind it in a spray of thick, foul-smelling gore. I spat on the floor, breathing heavily. The air was thick with the smell of cordite, blood, and burnt alien flesh. I dragged myself upright, my left leg screaming in protest, but holding my weight. Silence descended on the bay, broken only by the hum of the backup generators and my own ragged breathing. I limped over to the main control panel. I slammed my fist onto the blast door override. Heavy emergency bulkheads slammed down over the breach, sealing us in. The thumping vibrations of the horde outside continued, but they were muffled now. The thick titanium would hold them. For a while, I turned around. Genevieve was still kneeling on the floor. She wasn't looking at the dead monsters. She was looking at me. Her violet eyes were tracking the steady stream of blood running down my pant leg, pooling on the grated floor. She looked at my face, twisted in a grimace, covered in grease and sweat, my chest heaving. "You," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "You are heavily damaged. Why are you still conscious?" "Because," I grunted, pulling a heavy roll of duct tape from my tool belt. "I haven't got time to bleed." I ripped a length of the silver tape with my teeth. I wrapped it tightly around my thigh, directly over the fabric of my pants, binding the wound tight. The pressure was agonizing. I hissed through my teeth, tying it off. It wasn't medical, but it would keep the red stuff inside me until I could find a med kit. I slung the shotgun over my shoulder and limped over to Jackson. The Aurelian guard was breathing shallowly, his face completely slack in his healing trance. I grabbed him by the collar of his ceremonial armor and hauled him upward. He was lighter than he looked, mostly hollow bones like a bird. "Grab the captain," I snapped at the princess. Genevieve stared at me, frozen. "What?" "I said, grab Wyatt!" I barked, my patience entirely gone. "The bulkheads will hold for 10 minutes, maybe 15. Then the rest of the swarm gets through. We are moving to the upper comms relay, now." You dare command me?" She stood up, a flicker of her aristocratic pride returning. "You are bleeding. You are a common mechanic. You should be in torpor." I dropped Jackson's collar. I took 3 fast, limping steps toward her, towering over her despite her height, my face inches from hers. I let her smell the sweat, the copper of my blood, the sharp chemical tang of the gunpowder clinging to my clothes. "Listen to me very carefully, Your Highness," I growled, pointing a grease-stained, blood-smeared finger at her chest. "Your elegant weapons are useless. Your elite guards are asleep. Your royal blood means absolutely nothing to the things out there. Right now, the only thing standing between you and being digested in the dark is a tired human with a loud gun." She flinched, shrinking back from the raw, unfiltered aggression radiating off me. "So," I continued, lowering my voice to a harsh whisper, "pick up your captain, or I leave you both here for the crawlers." I didn't wait for her answer. I turned back, grabbed Jackson by his armor, and started dragging his unconscious body toward the stairwell. Behind me, I heard the rustle of fabric and the clatter of silver armor. I looked back over my shoulder. Princess Genevieve, the third heir to the Sun Throne, was dragging Captain Wyatt across the grease-stained floor, her pristine robes ruined, her eyes locked onto my back with a profound, terrified awe. I racked the shotgun one more time, chambering a fresh shell. "Keep moving," I said. "It's a long way to the top." The emergency stairwell was a vertical coffin of rusted grating and flickering amber lights. 30 flights up to the comms relay. Under normal circumstances, It was a brutal climb that left my lungs burning. Today, dragging a comatose, armored alien while bleeding out, it felt like an extended negotiation with hell. Clang, clang, clang. My boots hit the metal mesh heavily. My left leg was entirely numb now, replaced by a deep, throbbing ache that radiated up to my teeth. The duct tape was soaked through, peeling at the edges, a dark crimson stain spreading down to my ankle. I hauled Jackson up another step, by the scruff of his armor, my right arm screaming in protest. Below me, Genevieve was struggling. She was tall, but her skeletal structure was light, built for the low gravity of palace gardens, not hauling dead weight up industrial stairs. She had Wyatt by the shoulders, dragging his silver boots against the grating. Her breath was coming in ragged, high-pitched gasps. Her pale gold skin was flushed with a sickly purplish hue. "Stop," she wheezed, her knees buckling. She let Wyatt slip, his armored head thudding against the steps. My respiratory capacity. I cannot. The air is too heavy. I didn't stop moving. I couldn't. "Keep pulling, Princess." "I am physically incapable," she cried out, her voice echoing down the shaft. "My heart rate is entering the critical threshold. If I exceed it, I will involuntarily enter torpor." I dropped Jackson's collar on the landing of Flight 14. I turned around, leaning heavily against the railing. Below us, deep in the bowels of the station, the heavy titanium blast door gave a final, agonizing groan. Screech! Crash! Then came the chittering. It wasn't just a few of them anymore. It was a wave, hundreds of thousands of scythe limbs clattering against metal, a tidal wave of starvation flooding into the maintenance bay. I looked down at Genevieve. She was staring down the stairwell, her violet eyes wide, completely paralyzed by the auditory nightmare rising toward us. "Listen to me," I said. My voice was a dry, raspy bark. "You don't have a critical threshold anymore. Evolution lied to you. When the monsters are at the door, your body will do exactly what you tell it to do. Pick him up." "But my biology." "Your biology is a luxury," I yelled. "Out here, biology is just meat waiting to be eaten. Pick up your captain, or I will throw him down the shaft right now to slow them down." She stared at me. For a second, I thought she was going to faint. But something shifted in her alien features. The sheer, overwhelming audacity of a grease-covered mechanic threatening her royal guard snapped something loose in her aristocratic mind. She didn't argue. She gritted her teeth, bent her long, elegant back, and grabbed Wyatt's armor again. "Move," I said, turning back to Jackson. We climbed. By Flight 22, the clicking was directly beneath us. The vanguard of the swarm had found the stairwell. I could hear the scraping of chitin against the walls. They were fast, much faster than us. "They are coming!" Genevieve gasped, panic lacing every syllable. "I know," I muttered. "Use your weapon." "In a metal tube?" I grunted, dragging Jackson over the 25th landing. The ricochet from the buckshot would turn us into Swiss cheese. "Keep climbing." We hit Flight 28. The relay door was in sight, a heavy yellow bulkhead at the top of the shaft. A loud metallic crash echoed just 2 flights below. I looked down through the gaps in the stairs. In the dim amber light, I saw the pale, sickly grey armor of a crawler scrambling up the grated wall, bypassing the stairs entirely. "Go!" I shoved Jackson's heavy body toward Genevieve. "Take him! Get to the door!" She stumbled, catching Jackson's weight alongside Wyatt, practically crawling up the last flight. I unslung the M89. I couldn't fire down the shaft without catching the ricochet, but I didn't have a choice. I waited until the crawler crested the landing right beneath me. Its eyeless head snapped up, mandibles parting to reveal rows of jagged, rotting teeth. I aimed for the wall directly behind it, and pulled the trigger. The blast in the confined stairwell was absolute agony. The noise hit my eardrums like a physical punch, blowing my hearing out completely. A high-pitched ringing replaced the sounds of the swarm. The tungsten pellets hit the steel wall, shattered and sprayed outward into a cloud of lethal shrapnel. The crawler took the brunt of the ricochet. Its carapace splintered, and it fell backward, a thrashing mess of leaking fluids, tumbling down into the horde below and causing a temporary bottleneck. I didn't hear it hit the bottom. I just turned and dragged myself up the final stairs. Genevieve was waiting by the open yellow bulkhead, both guards pulled inside. I hauled myself through, hit the emergency lock, and spun the heavy steel wheel until the locking bolts slammed into place. I collapsed against the door, sliding down to the floor, gasping for air that tasted like blood and dust. The comms relay room was a freezing metal box. Dead consoles, dead screens. I slid down the wall, my left leg entirely numb. The duct tape was a lost cause. Dark blood pooled around my boot. Through the heavy steel of the bulkhead, the vibrations continued. Thump, scrape, thump. They were testing the metal. Genevieve huddled beside her comatose guards. Her once pristine golden skin was smeared with axle grease and alien ichor. Her 4 violet eyes were fixed on me, watching my chest rise and fall. "You are dying," she stated softly. "Not yet," I rasped. I dragged myself upright. My vision swam. I slammed my fist into my uninjured thigh, using the sharp spike of pain to force my brain to stay conscious. I hopped to the primary console, ripped off the access panel, and tore out the dead power cables. "What are you doing?" "Getting paid." I unlatched the heavy battery pack from my shotgun, the cell meant to power the smart choke. I stripped the console wires with my teeth, spat out the rubber casing, and jammed the raw copper into the shotgun's battery terminals. Sparks showered over my bare knuckles. The console hummed. The screen flickered to a sickly green. I slammed the emergency broadcast toggle. "Taggart's drop. Subterranean breach. Royal VIPs. Request extraction." Static hissed back. Crunch. A massive dent warped the center of the bulkhead door. The locking bolts groaned under the immense pressure. "Taggart's drop," I repeated, my throat tight. "Do you read?" The static broke. "This is the Aurelian Dreadnought. Sun Spear. Coordinates locked. Extraction inbound." I killed the power, saving the battery, and slapped it back into the M89. I limped back to the center of the room, facing the buckling door. I reached into my bandolier and loaded my last 3 shells into the tube. Genevieve stood up. She didn't cower against the far wall. Instead, she picked up Wyatt's fallen hard light staff. She held it awkwardly, but her grip was firm, and she stepped up to stand right beside me. The door blew inward. 3 crawlers surged through the gap, jaws snapping. I fired. The first beast evaporated in a violent cloud of tungsten buckshot. I pumped the slide. The second lost its front legs and collapsed into a shrieking heap on the grating. The third lunged, scythes raised for the kill. Before I could pull the trigger, the exterior wall of the relay vanished. A blinding flash of ship-to-station plasma erased the room's atmosphere. The concussive shockwave picked me up and threw me hard against the server racks. When my vision finally cleared, there was a gaping, jagged hole in the station, opening out into the cold void of space. A colossal silver warship hovered just 50 yards outside. Armored Marines jetted through the breach in a coordinated swarm. Their thermal beams flooded the hallway, incinerating the remaining beasts before they could even cross the threshold. I let go of the shotgun. The adrenaline finally abandoned me, leaving nothing but cold exhaustion. I slid back to the floor, gasping for air. A Marine approached me, raising his weapon cautiously at the bloody, battered creature sitting in the rubble. Genevieve stepped forward and pushed the barrel of his rifle aside. "Stand down," she commanded. Her voice no longer held fear, only the absolute, undeniable authority of the Sun Throne. "He is human." She knelt beside me in the dirt, her expensive robes ruined. "Your resilience, it defies logic. You should be in torpor." I coughed, tasting the sharp tang of copper on my tongue. I managed a weak, cynical smirk. If I die on the clock, the company voids my insurance. And I'll be damned if I fix this station for free. If you survived this descent into Taggart's Drop, hit that like button to keep the generators running. What did you think of the human mechanic showing the alien royalty what raw survival really looks like? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to share this with your fellow sci-fi fans and subscribe for more gritty HFY audio dramas delivered straight to your feed. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Make sure you're geared up for the next story.